So I'll be kicking off this session talking to you about human-related factors that might make individuals more vulnerable to profit-motivated cybercrime. Specifically, the way we as a society use technology in our day-to-day routine activities. So COVID-19 is a good sort of case study for understanding how changes in our use of technology may impact cybercrime vulnerability. This research can help us understand what factors must be addressed in the prevention of cybercrime in Australia. So we know that COVID-19 changed the cybercrime landscape. In Australia, there were increases in the number of reports of ransomware, phishing, and identity theft to the ACSC and ACCC, while international research documented increases in certain forms of hacking and many types of cyber-enabled fraud, specifically scams themed around COVID-19. So these changes in profit-motivated cybercrime victimisation can be attributable to two major sort of consequences of the pandemic. The first is changes to people's day-to-day routine activities, particularly their use of technology. And the second is the psychological and economic and sort of social stresses that came about as a result of the pandemic. So for those who aren't familiar, routine activity theory suggests that crime occurs when three situational criteria are met. So a suitable target or victim, which in the context of cybercrime can include things like personal information, financial information, and network systems, a motivated offender, and a lack of capable guardianship, which can include things like network administrators, VPNs, and identity authentication. So lockdown measures in Australia saw significant changes to people's day-to-day routine activities, both in their professional and personal lives. Many employees transitioned to working from home and began using their home internet connections to connect to their work IT systems. And they started using personal devices such as laptops and phones to undertake work tasks. So this increased the accessibility of targets while simultaneously lowering capable guardianship. Home internet connections can be less secure, devices may no longer have corporate security controls, and they might not get the updates and patching that they need. Additionally, sensitive work information can be shared over less secure personal devices. And unlike large companies and government departments, small to medium business owners generally don't have the same resources to employ cybersecurity staff and implement strong cybersecurity measures in their home environments. Many small to medium business owners also lack the necessary knowledge when assessing different sort of cybersecurity risks and vulnerabilities. During COVID-19, people began spending more time online in their personal lives, including increased consumption of online gaming, online pornography, social media, streaming services, and online shopping. And these changes in recreational activities may also increase vulnerability to victimisation. The use of online forums, pornography and dating websites, and making online purchases are also associated with fraud and scam victimisation, while online gaming is a common target for malware, fraud, and scams. The second way in which COVID-19 may have increased cybercrime victimisation is the social and economic and psychological stresses from the pandemic. With the onset of COVID in Australia, depression and anxiety were substantially elevated relative to usual population data, with pandemic-induced changes to work functioning, social functioning, and financial distress strongly associated with poorer mental health. These changes may increase vulnerability to profit-motivated cybercrime. Online fraud has been linked to negative life events such as financial crisis, serious illness and depression, as well as other mental illness and isolation. During the pandemic, profit-motivated offenders may exploit sort of the pandemic-related fear and anxiety that might make individuals susceptible to cybercrime, including their insecurity about the future and their need to sort of know about what's going on. Certainly, Australian families and individuals received large volumes of malicious texts and emails sort of themed around the pandemic from 2020 to 2021. So this study sort of used the COVID-19 pandemic to understand how changes in online routine activities may influence community members' vulnerability to profit-motivated cybercrime, over and above the effect of individuals' social and economic and psychological sort of circumstances, which may also increase their vulnerability. We also wanted to know if small and medium business owners were particularly at risk. So in June last year, we conducted a survey of 15,000 members of the public about their experiences of cybercrime. So this included cybercrime prevalence, victim risk factors, harms from victimisation, and reporting behaviour. We used an online panel with non-proportional quota-based sampling and then weighted the data to ensure that the sample was representative of the Australian population. This was a survey of individuals, but we did ask people whether they owned or worked for a small to medium business. Importantly, we used a bottom-up approach to measuring cybercrime victimisation, in that we asked about indicators or symptoms of victimisation rather than asking respondents to self-identify as a victim. So our survey focused on 4 major categories of cybercrime: identity theft, misuse or compromise, malware attacks, online abuse and harassment, and fraud and scams. We found that 44% of the sample, so around 6,500 respondents, had some form of cybercrime in the previous year. 25% had some form of identity theft, misuse or compromise, and the most common of these was being notified of your data being exposed in a data breach. 21% had signs of a malware attack, 18% experienced online abuse and harassment, and 10% were victims of fraud or scams. For this study, we just focused on the first 3, which are typically financially motivated crime. So I'll talk you through the results of some regression models, which I've summarised very simply here, but the details will be available in our Trends and Issues paper. First, we look at the economic and psychosocial stresses associated with the pandemic. So we asked respondents if they'd experienced a certain negative life event, specifically as a result of the pandemic, and coded this as yes or no. The dots represent statistically significant odds ratios for each variable, with blue for identity theft, green for malware, and red for fraud and scams. So the axis on the side has the odds ratios and a line at 1. So an odds ratio of 1 to 1 essentially means there's no difference between the groups. Above the line means there's an increased risk, and below the line means there's a decreased risk. So for the first variable, respondents who experienced increases in financial stress had a fraud and scam odds ratio of 1.55, meaning they were 1.55 times more likely to experience fraud or scams than those who didn't report an increase in financial stress. So we found that financial stress, increases in gambling and relationship difficulties were significant predictors of all 3 types of cybercrime victimisation. Individuals who reported increased time and money spent gambling were more than twice as likely to be a fraud or scam victim than those who didn't report that they increased their gambling. So decision-making can be impaired by alcohol and drug use, which was also a significant predictor of identity theft and malware victimisation. Financial pressures can be exacerbated by frequent gambling and substance use, and it may increase people's vulnerability to profit-motivated cybercrime when offenders promise them quick, sort of easy financial gain. So controlling for those psychosocial stresses, next we turn to people's routine online activities. First, we look at online activities that people would undertake in their personal time outside of work. We know that hours spent using the internet increased during lockdowns, and this was associated with higher fraud and scam victimisation. And people who reported using the internet for personal use 6 hours a day were 1.25 times more likely to experience fraud and scams than those who used the internet in their personal time for 1 hour a day. So using routine activity theory, This increase in online activity represents an increase in the visibility and accessibility of targets or victims. But it was more important what people were actually doing in their free time online. Purchasing items online, so in sort of online classifieds and marketplaces or on official sort of store websites, was associated with all three types of cybercrime victimisation, as was going on romance and dating websites or apps. This was particularly the case for fraud and scams, where individuals who frequently used dating or romance apps or websites were more than twice as likely to become a fraud or scam victim than those who didn't use these platforms as often or not at all. Online gaming and adult websites, such as pornography or adult webcam platforms, were also associated with increased risk. So all of these activities often involve communication between strangers on the internet. For example, online marketplace pages like Facebook Marketplace or Gumtree often involve communication with strangers, as do sort of dating websites and apps. Online gaming can have sort of live chat streaming features where people communicate in real time, as can adult interactive platforms. A lot of these activities also often involve a registration procedure where people are entering sort of personal information and financial information that can be targeted by cybercrime offenders. And cybercrime offenders have been known to lure victims off more legitimate dating platforms onto less monitored forms of communication, like Snapchat or WhatsApp, where they'll ask for personal information or money or send malicious links or try and get them involved in scams. We also know that the increase in online shopping triggered by COVID-19 saw an exponential increase in SMS text messages pretending to be delivery and post office services, which tried to trick people into paying money or clicking on malicious links. All right, turning to sort of work life. As I said, many employees transitioned to working from home and began using their home internet connections to remotely connect to work IT systems and using their personal devices to undertake work tasks. And this is sort of where capable guardianship may have declined. And as you can see, increased time spent online was associated with increased risk of fraud and scam victimisation. And working from home was associated with increased identity theft, misuse or compromise, but counterintuitively was associated with lower fraud and scam victimisation. And the variable of unsafe online behaviours was consistently a risk factor for all three types of victimisation. And this is sort of an aggregate variable which includes behaviours like opening emails from people and organisations that you don't know and sharing passwords, that kind of thing. So we found that working from home had a much larger impact for small to medium business owners. That is, they were significantly more likely to experience all three types of cybercrime victimisation compared to individuals who didn't own or work for a small to medium business. So dark green is working from home and the light green is not working from home. As opposed to small to medium business owners who didn't work from home during the pandemic, business owners who did work from home had a significantly higher probability of identity theft, malware, and fraud and scams. So in many cases, COVID-19 social distancing measures significantly increase vulnerability to cybercrime by reducing the capable guardianship afforded by secure workplace settings and networks. And these risks may be greater for small to medium businesses who often don't have the same resources and knowledge as large companies and government departments to rapidly implement cybersecurity measures. So overall, we found that evidence that a combination of factors in people's routine daily activities online and social and economic stress can influence their vulnerability to cybercrime. And this isn't just relevant to the COVID-19 pandemic, since a lot of industries and workplaces have continued working from home to some extent, and social and financial stresses will pop up in the lives of most people at some point. These findings highlight the importance of public messaging, which emphasises the threat of cybercrime and the value of data and privacy and what constitutes risky online behaviour. We need to be aware that certain online activities increase our vulnerability to cybercrime, such as online shopping, dating and gaming. Effective communication is needed to encourage the use of sort of simple protective measures such as multi-factor authentication, password managers, and antivirus software, while also addressing the human vulnerabilities underlying victimisation, such as impulsiveness, a lack of social support, or financial stress. So we need to understand how our cybersecurity needs change as our work environments change. Small and medium businesses should ideally have cybersecurity as an ongoing budgeted cost, with flexibility to implement new sort of security measures as employees start using new technology in new settings. Businesses should be required to meet minimum sort of standards for cybersecurity to reduce their vulnerability. But we need to be mindful about the risk of overburdening businesses without sufficient resources or capability to implement these requirements. There may be a lack of intrinsic motivation for small and medium business owners to spend money on implementing cybersecurity measures or undergoing cybercrime training, particularly when they're focusing on growing their business or they're just trying to survive a crisis like the pandemic. Compliance with minimum standards should therefore be assisted or incentivised. Cool. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to take any questions now or later.